Okay, we are live. What's up, everyone? We got to let it breathe just for a second because I got to bring on our Facebook crew here and get the whole fam damily under one tent. And we are good. So, welcome in, everybody. This is the Frozen Rope Podcast, and I'm your host, Chad Jensen. With me is the deputy editor of the Frozen Rope, Patrick Byrnes. Pat, we had to kick the can down the road one day just because of some of it's my fault, basically. Pioneer Day kind of threw off our schedule for this week, but we did not want to let a week go by without a Frozen Rope episode. So we decided let's just go Wednesday instead of Tuesday. How are you, bro?
I'm doing good. You'd think with this lull that there'd be nothing to talk about, but we're going to talk for half an hour, but we could go on all day about the topics we got today. So yeah, it should be a good conversation.
Doesn't matter what sport it is. Like, we all sign up. I mean, we're all here because we love watching basketball, right? We love following the Jazz and all that stuff. But my favorite time on the NBA calendar is the off season, just because as far as what we do with content and stories and articles and all that, because we get the speculation, we get the rumors, we get the what's going to happen, whether it's free agency, the draft, hirings, firings, trades, etc. And that kind of segues, I think, perfectly, Pat, into the topic for tonight. And by the way, Thamer, we see you in the chat. We're going to get your question here in a minute. And guys, we want your questions. Anything that's on your mind, get it in the chat, as you can see here on this ticker. Drop it in, and Pat and I will get to it. That's why we do this as a live stream podcast. We want to engage with you. All right. So, Pat, for possible trade, you said most likely. That's what it is. Utah Jazz, four most likely trade possibilities. Let's start with player number one. You listed in your article today, Kelly Olynyk, and you said you'd basically be, to paraphrase you, shocked if he doesn't get dealt by the trade deadline. Explain that.
Yeah, I mean, Olynyk, he's a guy that's, last year on his deal. And, with the way the luxury tax, the way that's rolling now, where teams are going to want to get under that luxury tax, the NBA, they're going to hit people hard. They're laying down the hammer on teams that are going to be over that tax, and that expiring contract is going to be gold, and you pair that with Taylor Hendricks needing a path for minutes. Right now, I mean, Taylor Hendricks they got Olynyk listed at the 4. So he's like literally like you got Collins, you got Olynyk, then you got Hendricks. So really, Hendricks doesn't have a path to playing time until they do something with Olynyk. Sorry about my dog. He's I can hear him in the background.
Hey, I own two dogs as well. We know how it goes sometimes. All we can do is the best we can do. So hopefully he'll be all right, but we'll roll with the punches. But go on, as you were saying.
But yeah, I mean, you got Hendricks needs a path to playing time. You got an expiring contract, and it's just a recipe for he's going to get traded. Plus, if the Jazz decide to go all in on a deal, like they try to go, they put all their chips in, they're going to have salary to match, the contract coming back, which you assume is going to be a big contract. So, yeah, I mean, Olynyk is gone. I mean, there's always like if the Jazz could let that contract expire and they'll have more money to play with in free agency next year, but I would rather use that contract in a trade. And the sooner it might be the better, because the sooner they trade him, the quicker that, Hendricks is going to get minutes.
Let's talk about the second guy, Taylan Tucker.
Yeah.
Once again, another guy on an expiring contract. Could be, as you say, his final year in Utah. But similar to Olynyk, all right, one of the pressures here, or let's say maybe incentives, besides the expiring contract, for the Jazz to entertain the possibility of dealing THT is you have a first-round pick waiting in the wings. This one, of course, different being that from Taylor Hendricks, in that Keontae George has already kind of flashed a little in Summer League. He's already kind of made himself a little bit more of a known NBA quantity, although I say that with the full understanding that we're only talking about Summer League. But explain why you got Taylan Horton at number 2.
Well, he's another guy that's on an expiring deal, and you either trade him or let the contract expire for money in free agency. And the Jazz don't have cap issues. They're well within the cap next year. They don't need the expiring contract to get under the luxury tax. So, Horton Tucker, due to the log jam at the 2 and the 1, he's got the contract where, he can be moved, and there's going to be a team that wants him. But I did say this, I did preface, trading Horton Tucker. I think the Jazz still have to see what they got in him. I mean, if Taylan Horton Tucker somehow makes that big jump this year, I totally believe that he should be the starting point guard of the future. But, like the way it's trending right now, I think he's more trending to get traded because, they drafted Keontae George. He's on the rookie deal. And, it just comes to, dollars and cents. And, when you're trading people, when people are getting moved, I know a lot of people just see like what's on the surface, the players, the contracts are just as, if not even more important, to do with the trade.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a contract that, that expiring contract players are going to want, or teams are going to want. And yeah, I can see him probably get traded at some point this year, unless he just shows out and just makes a statement saying, you know what, I'm the point guard of the future, and forces the Jazz to sign him to a long-term deal. But we haven't seen that from him yet. He's shown flashes, but he's got efficiency problems, and he's got shooting problems, and the turnovers. He turns the ball over a lot. So unless he can really show that he is the point guard of the future, this year, it's very likely he'll be traded at some point during the season.
You kind of realize Taylan Horton Tucker, it's possible that a little too much hype was made of him because of how the season ended. He did flash some huge games in that final third of the season. But, being on that player option, it was kind of flip a coin on whether or not he was going to come back, was the perception, right? I think the reality was maybe a lot closer to 80-20 that he was coming back, because I think around the NBA, they saw all those same things, Pat, that you just talked about, which is, hey, this kid obviously has a huge ceiling, Taylan Horton Tucker, huge talent, great scorer, all that. The length is ridiculous for what he can do as a ball handler and as a point guard, but efficiency issues, running the offense, keeping everybody engaged, keeping everything on point and in sync, and then, of course, protecting the ball. And I think he did get better with the protecting the ball side of things, toward the end. I'm talking like the last 2 weeks of the season. You could tell, I think, that he started really kind of figuring that out a little bit. But I think the NBA gave him the answer that he needed, which is, yeah, probably not. You're probably not going to find anything better than what the Jazz are going to offer you in your player option this year. What was it, $11 million, if I remember right, to return? And so he came back. So the implication there is the perception of THT outside the building, Pat, a little bit different, a little bit, off compared to how he's perceived, maybe not only within the Jazz organization, but the NBA at large. And then you factor in, I keep thinking about this from our last podcast. And then, of course, you wrote an article about this as well. And our friend, James Lewis, who you guys will all soon be introduced to here on the podcast, hammered on this in a conversation that I had with him yesterday, that Chris Dunn might be the guy who makes the very most sense to be this team's starting point guard to open the season. Now, we'll see how it shakes out, Pat, when, they get out on the court in training camp and all that stuff. But my point is, THT, I guess, still has a lot to prove, and more than maybe some fans might realize in terms of improvement.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think the Jazz are in a good spot with THT because you get that free roll of the dice to where if he does make a huge jump and he does, hit that ceiling this year or close to his ceiling, he could force the Jazz into a situation where they have to, sign him to a long deal. But, like I say, the way it's trending, you got Keontae George on that rookie contract, so you probably have to cut him loose. Due to the logjam at the guard position, due to that he's up in a year, and he just hasn't shown it yet, and you just can't take that risk, especially with how many guards they got. It's going to be hard to get Taylan Horton Tucker on the court this year. I mean, they could decide to roll the dice with him, but man, they got a lot of guards, and then you got the backup three's got some minutes available, but I think Abaji's going to get those minutes. I really do. So, Horton Tucker could be the odd man out when it's all said and done, but we'll see. Like I said, they got that free roll of the dice.
Let's talk about number 3. Again, this is 4 most likely Jazz players to be dealt. Colin Sexton. Now, you tie this into a little bit here in your article. Who do the Jazz love more? Clearly, especially what we know about Ryan Smith, ownership. They've shown some love. I mean, if money is the love language of the NBA, like most professional sports, then the Jazz definitely showed everybody how they felt about Jordan Clarkson by giving them that 3-year deal. But what does that have to do? Explain what that has to do with Colin Sexton relative to potentially being a trade piece.
Well, I think when you got Sexton and Clarkson on the same team, you're double dipping, as far as, and there's no reason to pay over $30 million to 2 guys when one guy can do the same thing. And I'm not a big fan of, Clarkson starting. I'm not a big fan of Sexton starting. I'm a fan of both players, but I think they're both 6 men at the end of the day. And it mostly has to do with what they offer defensively. I don't know if you remember last year. I actually wrote this down. I'll go through the numbers in a second. But before the trade deadline, they made that big trade. You had the guard rotation that we're getting the lion's share of the minutes was Colin Sexton. Then you had Clarkson, and then you had Mike Conley. Those 3 guys. Okay, and I don't know if you remember, but it was like every other night, the opponent's guard, whether it was their shooting guard or whether it was their point guard, would have like a career day. They would have like their season high. And I mean, no wonder you got Conley's not a great defender. Sexton's not a great defender. Clarkson's not a great defender. And like the other guards were just feasted. And I don't know if people remember, but after the trade deadline, when they started playing Horton Tucker and Chris Dunn, and when they got to Chris Dunn, those career average or those career highs stop. I mean, I'll pull the number. That guy crazy. Okay, so you got Spencer Dinwiddie. Okay, 35 points last year, career high, and all these games were before the trade deadline.
Pre-trade deadline.
Pre-trade deadline. Josh Green, not exactly an offensive juggernaut. Most people have probably even never heard of him. Plays for the Mavericks, 29 points, career high. Okay, Fred VanVleet, very good player. Averaged 19 points a game last year, 34 against the Jazz. Okay, it wasn't his season high, but still 34 points. Okay, Jalen Noel, 30 points. Okay, he averaged 10 points a game, scored 30 points on the Jazz. Okay, Damian Lillard. Okay, I know Damian Lillard's going to score on everybody, but still he had 60 on the Jazz. Okay, 60 points. Okay, I guarantee if Dunn's playing that game, Dillard's not getting 60. He might get 35, but he's not getting 60. Okay, Kyrie Irving, season high, 48 points. Kevin Huerter, 30 points, season high, averaged 15.2 points a game last year. Jordan Poole, 36 points, scored against our backcourt. It was his second highest output of the year. Reggie Jackson, who did literally, he got traded to the Nuggets. He was on the championship team. He didn't even get hardly any time. He wasn't even in the Nuggets rotation, to win that championship. I think he got like maybe 10 minutes the whole series.
Yeah.
27 points when he played the Jazz. Okay, Devin Booker, which I know Devin Booker's, he's going to score on no matter who he plays, 49 points when they played the Jazz. He averaged 27 a game, so 22 over his high. And that was when they were rotating Sexton, Clarkson, and Conley. And that's why I'm worried that, the Jazz, you got to have Horton Tucker, you got to have Dunn on the floor, or Abaji. One of those guys has got to be on the floor. You can't rotate George, Sexton, and Clarkson. That can't be your 3-guard rotation.
Yeah.
So we'll see how it plays out.
Ends up being in that scenario trying to fight fire with fire, and some of those guards, man, you just can't outscore. A Dame, for example, with the personnel that the Jazz have. Maybe in a like it takes a village kind of way, but still, that's not really a bridge you want to have to cross. While we're on this topic, though, Pat, let's grab this question from Thamer, I believe is how it's. Maybe I'm wrong though. Thamer. Either way. Appreciate you being with us tonight on the Frozen Rope podcast, and thanks for dropping a question in. He says, or she, I guess I don't know for sure. I have to say, what is the Sexton hate on the Jazz? He is like always in the trade rumors. For myself, he is the best option to replace later Jordan Clarkson. Let's talk about that, Pat, because when you talk about replacing Jordan Clarkson, that was a question this time last summer, right? Oh no, he's going into a contract year potentially where he's got the player option. Got to have your ducks in a row. Got to have some contingencies ready to go. Now he's locked back in for 3 more years. We got the 3-year additional on the new contract. So what's your answer here? This is kind of a 2-part. First off, why do you think Sexton is always being linked in these trade rumors? Because that is a true observation. It's been quite common this offseason.
Well, I think it's an easy answer to that. It's because teams want Sexton more than they want Clarkson. And if you're going to make a trade and you want value coming back, more value coming back, I think you can get more for Sexton than you can Clarkson. I agree with the question. I agree that Jordan Clark. I'd rather have Sexton than Clarkson, even though he's been injury prone, hasn't been able to stay on the court. He's younger, and I just think he's a little bit more of a dynamic scorer. Both of them, can't play defense. So if I'm trading one of them, I guess it depends. Like I said, with Jordan Clarkson, yeah, you can trade him, but you're not going to get as much back than if you were to trade Sexton. I know that Sexton was in those trade rumors to move up in the draft with the Milwaukee Bucks. And, the Milwaukee Bucks probably didn't want Jordan Clarkson's 3-year deal, with that luxury tax coming up and, his age. So right. I don't think there's room on the team for both players, long term. And I was puzzled that they just didn't when Jordan Clarkson's, opted in. I'm surprised that they actually, signed him to a 3-year deal. I would rather just have him opt in for that year and let his contract expire. To me, he's worth more than just keep Sexton. Then it's an easy decision. But apparently, Ryan Smith, they really like Jordan Clarkson. I guess, in Jordan Clarkson's defense, when all this Rudy Gobert, Donovan Mitchell, especially the Donovan Mitchell shenanigans, and the bad talk, nobody wants to play in Salt Lake. Jordan Clarkson didn't say a word. He walked the company line. He didn't do anything to make the Jazz look bad. And maybe the Jazz just want to have a player and to be able to, show the league that people do want to play here, and Jordan Clarkson's been that guy. So I don't know. There must have been some type of backdoor deal. Like if I opt in, I'm signing a long-term deal because it just doesn't make a lot of sense. But I agree. I think that I definitely think that I'd rather have Sexton. If I were to trade one, I'd rather trade Clarkson, except for the fact that you're going to get more back if you trade Sexton.
All right. Hey, thank you for jumping in with a question. We got another one here from Jared, who says on YouTube, again, thank you, Jared. Appreciate you, big dog. What's the bigger worry, Pat, for the guard rotation? Lack of playmaking or the defense? I think I know which direction this answer is going.
Yeah, it depends who's starting. If Dunn's starting, it's playmaking. If Keontae George is starting, it's defense. I think Dunn's the guy you got to start. When you look at those numbers, as far as guards feasting on our guards, I would start Dunn until Keontae George can prove that he can play defense. But we'll see. We'll see how it shakes out. But yeah, it's pick your poison. Do you want the playmaker on the court like a Keontae George, who's definitely more dynamic? He can definitely just based on what you saw off a summer league, he can create a shot a lot better than Dunn can. But Dunn's a much better defender, I'm sure, at this point in his career. I like Dunn. And I think with the Jazz, their starting lineup, if they're going to start Clarkson and they're going to start Markkanen, and then they got John Collins, I don't think they necessarily need a dynamic scorer on the court. I think that Dunn gives them more balance, but definitely I'm worried about both. It'd be great if Keontae George comes in and shows that he's even an average defender. That would be awesome. But he's only 185 pounds. It's not. It's what do you do? He probably needs another year to grow into his body before he can be a decent defender.
That's a football thing and it's a basketball thing. Growing into an NBA body, right? You get to the bigs, you get in with the state of the art, cutting edge sports science. The teams, practice higher and make sure they have available, and try and put some tactical weight on some of these really long, tall frames that you got in the NBA. And like you said, for a young guy like Keontae, that's probably about a year away before you start really seeing the effects of that. And by the way, Jared, check out his show tomorrow night, Thursday nights. He goes live with Salt Lake Takes, 5 p.m. Mountain Time, 7 Eastern. So he debuted his show solo style last week. It was great. I think a lot of people have fun with that one, and I know we certainly did. So don't forget to circle back every Thursday night with Jared on Salt Lake Takes. All right, Pat, we could talk about Simone Fontecchio, but he's a guy also who's kind of on the losing end of some of the offseason roster moves that have resolved the way they have. But being that we're at 20 minutes, I kind of want to segue. We got to the 3 bigger names on the list. I want to segue to something that 2 things real quick, because we're going to keep this about a 30-minute stream. We're at approaching 21 minutes. I wanted to get your take on what Zach Lowe said recently. I'm going to quote this real quick, guys. This is Zach Lowe on the Jazz. Quote, "My gut on them is they're at risk. They're at major risk for a step back in the West next season. Their guard play and their playmaking, specifically with Mike Conley now long gone, makes me nervous. The lack of perimeter passing talent, 37 wins feels like a big lift for this group." Close quote. Pat, what was your reaction to Lowe's analysis?
My first reaction is, how many Jazz games did you watch last year?
Right.
Zach Lowe. I mean, they weren't on national TV once, and he's pretty much got to make a comment on every team. But I thought he was off. I did some research as far as like the whole Mike Conley thing. I mean, I just all those numbers of those guards going off. Mike Conley was a big part of that. And I like Mike Conley. Like, I understand that what he brings to the table, a veteran presence in the locker room, a floor leader. He's more efficient than, the point guards we have right now, but he's terrible on defense, and he's a terrible rebounder. He doesn't rebound. And, I think what you get with Mike Collins, he gives back in his liabilities. I do. And it's not that I don't like I don't like him. It's just, man, he's 36. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like why is a guy that's 36 years old? I mean, maybe he's even 37 now. I'm not even sure. And he only played half the games last year. He played like 41 games for the Jazz last year. Why are we worried about? He didn't play last year. So why are you worried about him this year? And then the Jazz, I mean, after Mike Collins got traded, there was 22 games. Okay. The Jazz won 8-14 in their last 22 games. Okay. And this was without Collins. Markkanen didn't play in 11 games. Sexton missed 21 games. Okay. Clarkson missed 19 games. Okay. Walker Kessler, another starter, missed 6 games. Okay. Olynyk missed 6 games. So this is a, an 8-14 record with, without Conley, Mike Conley.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. 8-14 record without Mike Conley. Do you think if those guys would have played, do you think they would have won 3 more games? They would have gone 11-11. Of course they would have.
Right.
So you take that, you take health, and then you take that. John Collins is going to. You add John Collins to the mix. You add Keontae George to the mix. You add the fact that all these players in Will Hardy's system are going to be better versions of themselves from last year. I just don't see how someone can logically make a logical argument that, the Jazz are going to win under 37 games unless, they get hit by the injury bug. I do worry about this, though. The one thing, if I were a Jazz fan, the one thing I would worry about is Markkanen. And what I do worry about him is, I don't know if people remember last year when he was, the primary focus of the offense, he's going to take more of a beating.
Yeah.
He's taking the ball to the hoop. He's getting hit more. And by the end of the year, he was pretty beat up. Mm-hmm. He just was. And he's never been the number one, in an offense. And I think at the end of the day, that did take its toll. So I would like to see, some game management, kind of like what the other teams do with their players. I like to see him maybe sit every now and then, especially with the Jazz are trying to make a playoff push, because you want a healthy Markkanen. But that would be the one thing that I worry about, is Markkanen's health being the number one option.
All right, last thing, and we're going to grab your question here. Planeta Jazz. Hold on one sec, though, because this segues perfectly. Pat, from Andy Larson of the Salt Lake Tribune. He said, quote, on the topic of, I guess we'll grab it first. Thank you for the question. Says Ryan Smith said in KSL Sports Zone that Danny Ainge could make one or two moves this off season. What do you think? So put a pin in that question just for a moment. And let me read this. This is from Andy Larson, who said, quote, I suspect that despite the full roster, the Jazz are going to continue to be active in trade conversations for the rest of the year. Heck, all the way through the trade deadline in 2024. Just because the Jazz roster is full doesn't mean the Jazz front office is done. Work remains to become a true championship contender, and the franchise will push toward that goal. And then he goes on to say, Pat, quote, given that the Jazz will need Keontae George to star, see massive improvement from their current stable of young point guards, or stay patient and wait for an all-in all-star option. The dream is that 24-year-old Luca Doncic becomes available if Dallas starts to falter, but maybe a Trae Young or LaMelo Ball relocation also could be in the cards down the road, close quote. So segueing that, Pat, and then we're about out of time, into Planeta Jazz question here. Your thoughts on Ainge making one or two more moves this offseason?
I mean, they don't need to make one or two moves. I kind of just like where we're at right now, and I want to see how the players play before I make another move. I mean, there's so many log jams everywhere that I was like, what are you going to do? Like, they're still in that kind of see what you got phase. But if they, I mean, kind of like the Paul Reed thing. The Paul Reed thing looked like a thing that was going to help them long term. So if they can see that they're going to do players out there that can help them long term, then they're going to do it. But I don't know. Like I kind of like where things are at, and let's see how it plays out before we decide to what we're going to do. Because there's just a lot of players on the Jazz team where we just really don't know where they're at right now. But kind of going to the Luca thing, he talked about dream come true,
right?
Yeah, Luca from Dallas. I don't know. Like I know like Luca is a top 5 player in the league, but do you understand? I hate to be like a negative Nancy. I hate to be the hole in the bottom of the boat guy, but like, do you understand what it would take to get Luca in a trade?
Right.
Like Markkanen. You're not like getting Luca without breaking up the core that we have right now.
Yep.
You're just not. So like if you want Luca, we're starting over. We're trading Kessler. We're trading Markkanen. We're trading draft picks, and we're probably putting ourselves in the same situation that Dallas is in right now.
Exactly.
So and then you've got the Oklahoma City Thunder. You don't think they're not going to want to be interested in Luca? So let's say Luca does become available. We don't have enough assets to trump what Oklahoma City has. Oklahoma City has more players and more draft picks where they don't have to really mess with their core as much to get Luca than we would, because there's no way we're getting Luca without Markkanen, probably Kessler being part of the deal too. You're just not. He's a top 5 player in the league.
Yeah. It just, first of all, it seems like a fantasy that Dallas would ever come to that. I know that these rumors have been mostly triggered purportedly by Luca himself saying, hey, I'm not getting the help I want. I'm not seeing the commitment, the direction from the franchise. And it seems to be coming from him. And if a top 5 player wants to force his way out of a market, it's kind of hard to stop that. But I still have a hard time seeing Dallas allowing it to come to that. Like, that to me, you talk about it being, as Larson said, the dream. That's really what it is. Until it's not, that's what it is. But guys, this has been a great conversation. Thanks to each and every one of you for checking it out, checking us out. Planeta says also, pick Cavs may have value, that there are rumors. Don doesn't want to follow in Cleveland. Yeah, we're kind of out of time. We were going to talk a little bit about Jazz fans feeling the pain of the Cavaliers fans right now, and Donovan Mitchell, the rumors being that Donovan Mitchell, the Cavs aren't going to be able to re-sign him. He's going to want out and all that. But we're going to have to put a pin in that. We'll put it on the docket of topics to get to next week, Tuesday, 5 p.m., because we're out of time. But this has been a lot of fun. Guys, make sure you remember now, normally it's Tuesdays, 5 p.m. That's when the Frozen Rope goes live on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. Today, this week was a little bit different because of the holiday on Monday. But connect with us on Twitter. You can find Pat on Twitter at P Byrnes, Byrnes, NBA, myself at Chad and Jensen. And then connect with us on, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you're following us on Facebook and Twitter and all the different vice versas. It's easy to find us. Just search Frozen Rope or Inside the Jazz. You'll connect with us. But Pat, a lot of fun, dude. Can't wait to do it again next Tuesday, my friend.
Yep, it's been fun, and I'm sure we'll have a lot to talk about next week. It's been a fun off season, so yeah, it'll be good.
All right, guys. For Pat, I'm Chad. We'll talk to you next week.